What's up, everybody? Welcome to DJ and Dad's podcast. Today, we are doing a slightly different format. We hope that you love it. And we also have a very special guest that I'll introduce in just a minute. The main topic of today's show is going to be talking about recursive ordinals and something very interesting that could honestly change a lot. And I'm not just saying that to bait you into watching this episode. Like, just watch throughout the episode of how crazy that this is going to be for blockchain technology and decentralization and just digital goods. It's going to be mind blowing. So I'm super excited for the conversation that we're going to have today. And of course, our special guest. So what's up, Brock? You've been on the channel many of times. You are definitely a familiar face. How's it going
Awesome.
today?
It's about to storm, so hopefully that doesn't happen. And it just sounds like a thunderstorm this whole podcast. But thanks for having me.
Oh, it's all good, man. It'll add some effects to the episode for sure. If things get dry, instead of us having to play background music, we can just rely on your storm. And you know what? Even if lightning hits your house, you will probably have better internet connection than me. So at least you still have that.
True facts.
What's up, Kyle? How's it going for you, man?
Hey, it's going good.
Good. Yeah, it's going good.
Short intro. I know we got a banger of an episode, so I don't want to distract. We already know who I am, so let's kick it off, baby.
We know that you're a father, and I will do an icebreaker for myself. I got my Pudgy Penguin plushes in this week. My daughters love them. I got my little positive penguin right here. It says, keep going. And I got like a couple of different signs. And shout out to Fishes. This isn't officially Fishes, but it's got
nice.
Fish on it.
Well, thank you.
So,
represent.
It says, you've got this. My daughter's had two options, and obviously, like my 2.5-year-old, she's the older one. She wanted to be the one to really pick which one, and one of the plushes has like a hat, a fishing hat with like two fish on it, and she like had to have that one because it had the fish on it. And the other one,
the fish.
Well, the other one was superhero.
So thank you.
Yeah, shout out to Brock. He's a founder of the Fishes and an awesome NFT project, constantly doing airdrops and innovation for the space. So definitely check that out. So today we're going to be talking about recursive ordinals. This is a very newfound, I guess you would want to say, tech. Basically, so you have ordinals, which are inscriptions on Satoshis on Bitcoin. And where for the last few months, we've kind of been using them for like NFT style projects like art. A lot of art type stuff, some generative projects and stuff like that. Well, basically, and I'm not the developer side of things. Brock definitely is, and Kyle has a lot more experience in that side. But basically, they found a way to essentially build inside of these inscriptions, even to the point where you can add code to them, which opens up like a new array of possibilities. And they're calling this recursive ordinals. Brock, do you want to explain that kind of more in a techie way than probably what I just said?
I don't know about a techie way, but the best way that I would think of it is like because of these new kind of enhancements called ordinals, and you can learn more. That there's tons of resources out there, but think of it as every single Satoshi, so every single penny of a Bitcoin is now a slot that you can store something inside of. And I think there's a file size limitation, but you could put images was like the first go. And so we've got these like digital artifacts or similar to an NFT, but everything's stored on chain. It's actually stored inside of that Satoshi. And then there's viewers and everything. So it's a very kind of a brave new world because we're still building tools and explorers to make it easier to kind of like consume and look at this content. But the magic kind of switch, so to speak, is we've gone from images to it can now store files. And those files, because I can store, say, like a library or something in a Satoshi, I can now take a website that then uses that Satoshi's data in my website. And so you can start to do like ordinals all the way down kind of thing. So it unlocks this huge file storage. And I think what we're going to get into in a little bit is it could actually unlock a brand new kind of internet. And I know that sounds like super hypey, but just we'll get into it, I think.
Yeah, man. Well,
this could be interesting too for like censorship proof, like material. You know, we fortunate enough, most of us I think live in the U.S. or hopefully in a good place, but not everybody does, you know, and that's the truth of things. And so I could see like a use case where, you know, you might have maybe not the best government in your country, and that could be something where maybe people want to look up some news and they're not able to because, you know, somebody might be blocking that. So I could see some pretty interesting use cases coming out of it where it could be beneficial for society as a whole. So super excited for the future of ordinals and recursive inscriptions.
Okay, man. You know, and we're we're like the first weekend, and I feel like just like having this conversation is like kind of scratching the surface of like possibilities that are gonna be able to do with this. And I guess we'll just like go ahead and like rip the band-aid off of like one of the possibilities that like I know Brock you came out swinging with. And I saw a couple of people, I tagged you in that post yesterday talking about being able to upload, essentially input Ethereum smart contracts into a Bitcoin ordinal. You
Yeah,
want to talk
yeah.
about
So I
that?
think the knee jerk reaction is, oh my gosh, I can put HTML in this. Which HTML, for those of you that maybe don't know, is kind of like the building blocks of the internet. There's primarily three main things that your browser can interpret, and that's HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and of course like images and media and things like that. But that's like the code, right? And so in theory, what people are doing now, and this is kind of the one step, is take my HTML, take my CSS, and take my JavaScript, upload each one of those things as your CSS and your JavaScript, upload those as ordinals first and inscribe those, and then use a website that embeds those ordinals into your website, and now you've got a website living off of a Satoshi. The problem is, and unless we get into some kind of like reinscription process, is it's static, right? Like how do I update my website? And so I think building upon this ecosystem of decentralization, if you look onto the Ethereum side, through smart contracts, you can actually build, and I might show some code. And if we want to get into it, I want to go like, hey kids, let's walk through some code. Happy to do so. But I built a quick prototype of what that might look like. Of you can deploy a smart contract that basically is like a registration for HTML or CSS or JavaScript, and then you can kind of add those records in, remove them, and then have your actual Bitcoin Satoshi calling out to the Ethereum network to that smart contract, getting the data, and then using that to render your page. So then you get actually, instead of like immutability, you get on an unstoppable website, is what I'm kind of coining it, where all your files and everything lives on Bitcoin. All of the organization or the orchestrating of what files and what kind of embeds go in when and where live on this smart contract that only you can update. Or taking it further, you could make it to where you can improve certain, using all the power of smart contracts. You could say these 3 people have access to update the website, or what have you. So then it turns into this new way of web development. And then from there, I think you're going to start to see ordinal browsers and things like that, where this just becomes its own thing. And using the same Bitcoin and smart contract kind of marriage and working in harmony, you could see the next Google emerge. That's like, how do I discover ordinal websites? And that can be built. And you could build a back end that is the same thing. Instead of rendering it in a viewing state, it's actually just rendering like, here's all my libraries and here's this, and I want to drag and drop them. And then that behind the scenes makes it easy to update the smart contract. So yeah, it's going to get really wild really fast. But I think the marriage of the two kind of unlocks a lot of things, leaving only very little out that we already have from the web. And then it all lives, I guess, the crazy, like, why would you do this? It sounds overly complicated. One, I think like the censorship that we talked about it could be huge. Beyond that, though, file storage and hosting, right? Like, if you inscribe this website once, that's your hosting fee forever. And then the smart contract, like the gas to update your website, should be very lean and small, because you're not doing these huge like mints or anything like that. All you're doing is just updating data and reading data. So your website, actually, like all those hosting costs, there's people that spend thousands and thousands of dollars hosting a website. It's now living off blockchain, and I saw someone deploy a website yesterday for $6, and then the fees were high then, right? So there's some people that are paying for small servers and what have you for $6 a month. So you're turning a monthly cost to a forever one-time payment. It opens a lot of doors and makes things accessible, where maybe somebody wants to build a website or build a business, and they can't afford the hosting costs because they don't know if they're going to make enough income in the beginning, especially if you're outside of the US, where money just works differently. We'll just leave it at that. This now kind of makes that more accessible, where you can do a one-time deploy, and now you've got a business that's out there forever, and you don't have to worry about, am I going to make the $6 for next month, or if this scales, can I afford the 500 or whatever it ends up being? So it opens a lot of doors and makes things. Go ahead.
So let's recap that, though. It's like the accessibility, the financial problem, which, there's so many currencies in the world. So another way, so not only technically accessible, but financially accessible, because a lot of people use Bitcoin around the world. And then you have the hosting, the Bitcoin network, which is up 24/7, the mother chain of the genesis of, blockchain. And so it's, interesting in all those regards, and censorship. So there's a lot of big points you're talking about, Brock. So I just wanted to like reset the room here, and like, man, those things like, make your mind really explode and have that aha moment. So I just wanted to, hit on
No
those
worries. My
points.
ADHD ran away with me, so
it,
happy to have you summarize the stream of consciousness. Yeah.
no, yeah, it is mind blowing, and it's honestly, I'm still grasping the concept, but like to promote that concept, it's easy for me to explain to others. Like I explained to my wife, like imagine, because like I pay like $25 a month for like to use
Mm-hmm.
Shopify and like their servers, and then she pays for like several photography. She pays for like several photography, like just to be able to host like her pages. So being able just to have a one-time fee for that and have that just so permanent and not being able to be taken away from her if the person who has a server like were to like not do it anymore or whatever, like she wouldn't be like stranded. So like she gets that, and it's like so much cheaper and more accessible. So and then to think that like people like we are going to see the next like Google and things like that are like on the decentralized web. Like I don't know, that's kind of
Yeah.
mind blowing to me. Like if all of this like continues at the pace that it's going, like this really could affect everyone to some degree. Like or at least it will be exposed to like almost everyone to like some degree. And it's like right now there's like literally like I mean I can't put an exact number on it, but the people that even like understand that like what's happening like is compared to everyone is like so
Yeah,
minute.
Bitcoin wallets, I
Like
think it's like 1% of the world is that. And so like Bitcoin's the biggest. You're at like 1% of the world, right? So it is very, very small. And of that is a smaller set of people doing ordinal
yeah,
stuff. And like there's so
it's less
many,
than 1%
but
of
this
that.
tech, like the
Yeah, I would say less than 1% of that is like
mhm.
understands ordinals or cares about ordinals, and then less than 1% of that would understand recursive ordinals already the first weekend.
What we're talking about is like the precipice of like, the advancement of blockchain, like the advancement of society as a whole. When you talk about decentralization and ownership and things like that, it's like literally at the very, very peak of um, tech advancement, in my opinion. So we're here early. I mean, what Brock prototyped, like there's not many other people. You can't even count on a hand how many people have actually done this. So to be here and just to be sitting talking about it is like literally like at the beginning, like the genesis days of this type
Yeah.
of stuff. So truly mind
Yeah,
blowing.
and I think it is a double-edged sword, though. So I think like just as much as we're making unstoppable domains, some things you might want to stop, like if it's something that's like kind of a crime against humanity or something like that. But I think that
Sure.
those kinds of things are going to find their place anyway. Unfortunately, I think the benefits outweigh hopefully the bad. And I would love it if there was some country where there was kind of some regime that was like very 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 harsh or punishing the people, and the truth is kind of being suppressed. Being able to have someone deploy something from an anonymous wallet, add three other wallets, and have them actually to like kind of report live and have this Satoshi be like an unstoppable source of truth from someone's perspective, and sharing that with the world and have that get amplified to hopefully make things right. Those are the things that I think, or I hope that it gets used for. But again, you're saying it's like a 1% could even come up with this or whatever. Like, cool, big up in me. But at the same time, I think I saw the one step and I just went 4 steps further, right? Like this was going to happen no matter what. I just had a shallow thought that of like of doing this. And so yeah, I think that it's already practical today. Like you could already do it today. But there are some shortcuts, I think. So like if you were going to try to embed an ordinal, a lot of the examples right now are using like ord.io, which no shame to them. But if that ever went down, then all these things die, right? So we need to get to the next step of where it's actually like the website itself is checking the on-chain data within itself, or using an ordinal, I guess, to get that to do it. So there's some things that like for fully unstoppable, we're not quite there yet with even this prototype that I whipped up really quickly. But yeah, it's going to be there. Like this is going to be the thing, and someone might stand up like a new service that's, hey, you're an artist or someone that's not technical, log in here, make it drag and drop like you do with normal websites. But now you hit deploy, it deploys, it hits a smart contract, and now you're in business, and you're logging into like a very Web 2 feeling thing that is completely decentralized and unstoppable.
Right. You think of like the Wixes, or if you go even before Wix, there's Weebly and
Or
like all these like
all the way back to
Web two
MySpace, where
builders that
people were
just
like doing hand, like I think a lot of people in my generation like learned to hand code almost because of MySpace being able to customize. Like this is in a way the new MySpace, where people are going to be able to people are going to
Zanga.
be able to dabble in this, and in a way it's exciting. It's taking you back to like the early days of the web as we know it, with this new decentralized thing. And there's going to be some friction. Like the technology to do it exists. That doesn't mean it's easy. Like the ordinal stuff, I've talked to even people that are pretty technical and savvy on like the Ethereum side, and their eyes glaze over with getting into this. But there's some great folks out there that are pushing this forward because they see the path, and it's going to get easier. So right now it's very cumbersome and difficult, but I see very rapidly it's a click here to connect your wallet, pay the fee to deploy and to inscribe, and then maybe a fee because the convenience to the company that built that, and then you're in business. Though it's still a one-off fee to be going with your website, and then you can just log in whenever and update it.
Yeah, so I was really using Ethereum mainly for over a year. So after the ordinals started kind of going off, I kind of got into that field. And as far as like the tech side goes, it did feel like a couple steps backwards having, well, one, just even transactions on Bitcoin, like it might take me 45 minutes from the time of purchase to actually receiving my ordinal. But also just like everything it's kind of hard to explain. Everything just felt like a couple steps backwards. Like I think they were even getting like flack for it, like about just everything being on spreadsheets again, and like the way that things are distributed, and like I mean, obviously the lack of contracts and everything like that. I totally it does feel like we are moving back, but just to be able to take wider steps forward with this, and so I think the idea of being able to use Ethereum contracts inside of Satoshi. I don't know. That's like a really mind blowing idea because in my head, and I'm not as OG as either one of you guys. I mean, I know Kyle said he's been in Bitcoin since before it was
Yeah.
created. Brock, I know you've been here for a long time as
I mean,
well.
I was early, but I bought a
But
Bitcoin at like $30. But that was like still a whole story. There was still like
yeah,
people that bought it at 2 that I know of, right? That were that. So
yeah,
I think we're still, it's the meme of we're still early, but like this literally just happened like a couple days ago for this, but that is the unlock for so many new things to come, and there's going to be more things that unlock beyond that. But I saw, I think one of you guys surfaced like, hey, here's like smart contracts on Bitcoin, and I was like, I looked at it and I was like, I don't know if I fully agree. And the funny thing is like, why not use Ethereum contracts on Bitcoin and have the two
yeah,
actually like work in harmony? There's so much like people that like, I'm a maxi here, I'm a maxi there. It's like when they work together though, it's this like sweet harmony of like, we now have unstoppable websites, and I'm sure there's another network that you like ZK rollups, right? Like the ZK
mhm,
theory or the EVMs that's coming out, like that's going to be mind blowing what that opens up. And then you combine that with this, and so as far as speed and all the other things, like very much, I think that there's going to be things that just kind of it all starts to work together, and I think that's been the corner that we've been waiting as an industry to turn, as like a crypto industry or blockchain industry
Mhm.
to turn to where it's like, oh wait, this doesn't have to die for this to win. They can all kind of win and have their place,
yeah.
and yeah,
Exactly. It's like a testament really to obviously Bitcoin and Ethereum, to the most decentralized blockchains, and taking the best really from both and combining them into the two. So it's like peanut butter and jelly, so to speak, of what's going on and what we'll see. I mean, like you said, we're just at the beginning, and it's going to be interesting to see how people use this, build applications, and all that, like on using Bitcoin and Ethereum networks to build for the greater cause of society. I think that's really cool, what's happening here.
Yeah, we talked about like obviously like building websites, and I do want to look at
sure,
like what you have on the sharing in a bit. But like you can also like just for fun, like you can build games now inside of Satoshi's.
yeah.
Like
I
that's
think
pretty
some
crazy. And I would assume we could kind of apply the same theory that we're talking about to games, like being able to upgrade games
yeah,
via Ethereum smart contracts. And then it even makes me think again, I'm not the tech guy here, but it even makes me think like, would you also be able to have like a layer two inside of that? I don't know, like be able to interact with a layer two inside of that Ethereum, inside of that Satoshi for like cheaper to like have the permanence and decentralization of Bitcoin, have the contracts of Ethereum, and then have the cheap fees of like this layer 2. Like I don't know if that'd be
Yeah,
costly
or
or
like, I
not.
mean, so not trying to shill. Don't buy a fiche if you don't want to. But in my project, I use like 4 different blockchains, right? So for the airdrops, it would be not practical for me to airdrop the 75,000 airdrops that I've done, actual number, on Ethereum, right? So I use Polygon for that, but they still have utility and all of those other things that I'm able to do. But it also works alongside the fiche that they have that are on Ethereum, and so like I do the heavy lifting for the technical side to make those all work. But just as this that I'm saying, like, oh, you could do this on Ethereum, you could do the same on Polygon if you need the cost savings of the gas. But there are trade-offs there as far as like some people don't want to mess with a layer 2 yet. I think eventually it all becomes in the background, and you won't know what you're dealing with, and it'll be the right solution for the right job. So I wouldn't want to poo-poo on anyone's kind of idea. But yeah, I think you could use a layer 2 or many other things to make this work together. But right now it's HTML website, very simple. What I'm describing is a dynamic, like the way to update something that should be immutable, but doing it in a way that's still all on chain. But then you're going to see the people that take this and make applications where, like, the next, like I said, Google or email is running off a single Satoshi, and it's just running off all of these background smart contracts. And it's, you log in and only you can see it because you're the person that kind of sped up this thing. And this could revolutionize tons of things in a decentralized way. But yeah, we'll see where it goes. But right now, very cumbersome, and it's gonna, when we get to like the code thing, I'm gonna try and like not dumb it down, but just make it relatable. But at the same time, someone's going to take this idea and push it even further to where it becomes just a turnkey service that wraps around all of this technology. So even if this, like, your eyes roll back in your head and you're like, I don't understand this, like, it's okay, because we're built, like, the devs are pushing it forward, but eventually designers are going to come in, product people are going to come in and just make this more palatable for everybody.
I'll try to help guide people through. I mean, being on calls with you and really trying to mess with code myself the past few days makes me realize how advanced developers like you and people out there are. I mean, it's actually really incredible. I've been trying to mess with the VS Code and code up and do all this other stuff, and it's difficult to learn at first, but it's exciting at the same time. So, whenever you're
Sure.
ready to screen share too, I'd love to
I,
see.
I do want to say, I think when we actually upload this, I'm not too sure the viewers are going to be able to see
Oh.
it. So I'm gonna just try to explain what we
So
see
it's
a little
picture
bit.
an ocean. No, I'm just
I
kidding.
might, I might be able to put it up there. I guess we'll see
Yeah,
when
and
we
this
get
is a quick
there.
prototype that I
Um,
just like tag teamed with ChatGPT. It just did it in like 10 minutes. So this shows the
sure.
concept. Like, there's going to be some stuff that this is not a perfect example. If I wanted to take it further, then I'd put it out on like GitHub or whatever. But this is just a quick thing. Hopefully,
I do want to say that Ordinals kind of seemed overwhelming for me at first, because before there was developers that made easier functionality for it. In order to inscribe one of those first, or like really 10,000 Ordinals, you needed to be running a
Mhm.
Bitcoin node, and you needed to kind of go through a process to inscribe. So it wasn't like you could just do what you can do now and just go through something that's already built for you, upload the file that you want to create, you want to inscribe it into a Satoshi, and then you're ready to roll. You actually like had to go through like somewhat of a process. So like a lot of things do seem like, wow, how's that going to be adopted? Because that's like way too technical, and the only people like Brock are going to be able, and maybe the Kyles are going to be able to like do that. But once developers kind of get a hold of it, and like creative people get a hold of it, like it becomes a lot easier for the
Yeah,
Chris's in the
yeah,
world.
and I think even there's people that are outside of your knowledge, right? Like my mom, I couldn't call her up and say, "Hey, can you make this ordinal, like inscribe this ordinal for me?" She would she would just hang up the phone on me, right? And so I think that there's a long ways to go before this is like mass adoption, but I do think that this is a path, and if we keep pushing on it, it can be something really special. So yeah, just real quick, this is just a VS Code window. I've got a contracts folder here that I'll walk through in just a sec, and then this is what I'm calling ordinals, but these are just like website files that you would typically use, that they will need to be inscribed as ordinals, right? So we'll get into this. I'm going to start on the Ethereum side. So right now, anybody that's listening at home, if you can't see this, there's going to be like Bitcoin land on one side and Ethereum side on the other side. So right now we're going to jump over to the Ethereum side. So the first thing,
I'm recording. I'll
perfect.
send this over to Chris,
So the
so
first
we'll
thing
be
that we
able to
want
see.
to, and I'm not going to walk
Ew.
line by line either. The first thing that we'd want to do is deploy just like a proxy contract. This is pretty standard. what this is basically saying, I want to reserve an address that I can use, but I might need to change my address, like all my contract behind. So this contract is a contract that just points to another contract, and I can update what contract that looks. So common practice, like an upgradable smart contract, if you will. So I think that's a good kind of like 1 foot fence that you should start with. Not a requirement, but should you ever need to update your website, this is a kind of a future proofing, if you will. So here it basically just says, hey, here's where the contract I want to point. So when I initialize this, it'll point to another contract, and it checks that I'm the owner so that nobody else can come in and change this out from underneath me. But I do have a change owner in there. So say I build this awesome web service and I want to sell it to somebody later on, I can change them to the owner so then they can change and upgrade and stuff. But yeah, all this does is basically just say, hey, I'm a contract, but I point to this other contract. Pretty straightforward. Unless you don't know Solidity, then you're probably like, that's text. But hopefully that the concept that I described, it makes sense. The next thing, and again, this can be done a lot of different ways, but the way that I envisioned it is everything's a resource, right? So it could be a style sheet resource, a JavaScript resource. It could be HTML blocks on the page. And so you could just say, here's my header, here's my body, here's my footer. Like these are just blocks, and you just add them, and you can pick an order. So the order in which they would be called or loaded on the screen. And based on the type, so I've got here type of CSS, JavaScript, content. Based on those things, is how it will render, and I'll show you how that magic works on the HTML side in just a second. But this is basically just finding what they are, making it an array, and then I can just add them. So I can add new ones right here. So add a new resource. That's me just saying, here's the thing that I want you to, and so it's either an ordinal address or an HTML block, what type it is, and then a page URL, which I think that the next step is going to be like navigating within ordinals, different pages. And so you could load different content based on which page you're on. And you can make it to where it just jumps to another ordinal. Like that's the simple way. But I also think that you could do like self-contained single page applications or whatever. And then finally, just the resource type. So that's adding. Then you can delete them. So if something like I don't need that anymore, or I'm removing the old CSS and I'm adding in my new style, what have you, you can do that. This one, again, isn't mandatory unless you're going to break down a website into different pages where it just sorts by, give me just the stuff that is just this page. And you could even do that where you get everything and sort it on your website side, but whatever you want to do. And then finally, get all the resources. So this is kind of like the secret sauce is everything that I've registered, just give it to me when I load the page. So I'll just call that function from my website. It gives me all the things that I've registered, and then it loads them into the page and injects them into the page to load. So this is like the dynamic side. Sorry if I've gone really deep into the technical side. Any questions before we jump back to the Bitcoin side?
This is why kids need to get in school and learn code.
Again,
ChatGPT
wrote this with my help. Hey, I want this. Nope, that's, and so I think learning how to code will help you because ChatGPT will just straight up lie to you. But it wrote this like 80%, and then I finessed it and made sure it did what I wanted. And so working hand in hand with AI, ChatGPT, like it turns me into like a 3 or 4x developer. So it's not going to be a magic genie, but if you know enough code, it can really help you get started at least, and then you can get into like the nitty gritty and the details.
Yeah, it's kind of like akin to articles. Like if you're writing an article, it might say some goofy stuff in there that you might have to go back, make it feel more human-like. So that's kind of what some of the use cases I use for ChatGPT.
So yeah, learning to code, I think, much like a foreign language, it will help you if that's the area that you're going to dabble. But I don't think you're out if you don't learn to code either. But cool. So that's the Ethereum side. Now on the, I put some instructions up here, but I'm going to just paraphrase them. Basically, the website here, this HTML code is one single div. And so I wanted it to be very, very lean. And so all I need is basically like a box to put the website inside of. And so the next thing is I'm using something called Ethers.js. That's a library that uses JavaScript that can connect and talk to the Ethereum network. And that would be an ordinal that I would upload. And then I would swap this reference for the reference to the ordinal. So that's, again, ordinals all the way down. Thinking Bitcoin really like is your file storage. Ethereum is like knowing what to kind of orchestrate to load the page. Beyond that, I would just inject whatever that proxy, once I deployed that Ethereum contract, whatever that proxy address is for the contract, I would replace that here. I would load in the ABI file. ABI file is basically just like telling the code what functions it can call. That gets generated when you deploy the contract. So, or you can generate, I guess.
So just to like, for people that have no idea like what's going on here, So Ordinals kind of like the soul, kind of to use like a that reference, is like kind of the soul, and then like around the soul is like your body, that like, or something like that, right? Like, I don't know, is there
Yeah,
a
I
good
think
way
the
to
best way is
describe
like
that?
it's the house metaphor, right? So these ordinals, or a website, this one is going to be the bones, but it's the bones with like your spinal column in it, where it can kick off stuff to the brain of Ethereum, and it can interact with your body. It can control the rest of it. So this is the skeleton, and it's very very small. It's just bones, but when combined with the brain, now you can start to move. And then taking it further, the JavaScript is like the plumbing of a house, and then the style sheet is like the skin or the outer looking kind of stuff. So when all of them work together, you've got a working website that can do things and looks a certain way. So this is like kind of the hardest to wrap your head around part, but it's just a small, very very lean website that just has a box in it, and then a little bit of JavaScript that says, hey, let me talk to Ethereum at this contract address. And then once it does that, there's one simple function that just says, give me everything. And while it loops through all of those things, it checks to see, is it a style sheet? Is it a JavaScript piece? Is it content? And load them in the order in which we stored them. And then that's it. And so it says, give me everything from Ethereum. Ethereum gives me all of those ordinal addresses, and then I'm able to include them how I need to. And then ta-da, website. And this is just, if it's the style sheet, do this. If it's
There's a little ding right after
yeah,
that.
I have a
Somebody in the audience had a light bulb just go off.
and then
They might be the next
the content down here,
Google
and then
right
it just
there.
at the end it just says, hey, put it all inside that website block, and that's it. So again, I'm not trying to say this is the perfect code or whatever, but just this is the concept of HTML, and then you can put in your style sheets, your JavaScript, whatever, put those as ordinals, go back to your smart contract, load them in the order, and you can, there's that order field, so you can determine where you want to put things in order, and then ta-da, website. And it's all running off a single Satoshi.
And there is addresses on Bitcoin layer too. So you know, you have your .es, now you have your .btcs, and so you can,
but you could even
literally
buy,
host,
like a lot of people are sliding around these, like again, these ord.io, like where you can full screen the Satoshi ordinal, and I think that's a great look at where these things are going to go. I think we go further where there's like a browser that just lets you just do these things, to where you don't have to use like ord.io or whatever. But the work that they're doing is the foundation for those things, right? And so by doing that, though, you could actually take a normal .com that you buy from Google, don't buy from GoDaddy, but you could buy a .com and point that even to your ordinal website to make it easier for like Web 2 people, and people would not even know the difference. So like it doesn't have to be the decentralized domain names that we use. Definitely can, but you could even use the Web 2 thing that points to the Web 3 thing, and then nobody would know anything else.
But you could sell it as a Web3 thing,
Sure.
like if you wanted to sell like fishes.btc or whatever, right? You could set like you could encapsulate the Satoshi under that, or it would be .sat, I think, whichever
you could
one's
totally
used.
do that. But I'm saying, like, even if like you're a coffee company or what have you, you could build your website completely now on this, save a bunch of hosting cost, and just route your .com to your Satoshi or the ordinal viewer.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
and then your customers wouldn't even
and
know.
in the future, this just exactly, like, we'll get to a point where this just feels like, oh, I'm just going to like, to Google, typing in a website address, and it pulls it up, reads the file, and we're good to go. And it mimics also like Namecheap, GoDaddy, where you want to go sell your domain and you can go do that. But we're so early, we're looking at the code side of things and connecting the dots and endpoints together here.
Yeah. So again, works today, but it uses some shortcuts of using some nice tools that people have built for us that are technically not unstoppable. But I give it the way things are going, give it a week, and I'm sure today, if you wanted to tinker, you could start to pull that on-chain data yourself. I just think someone's going to make a library to make it a lot easier.
So I know that it is a little off base and probably not exactly what we're talking about here, but like I know a lot of early Bitcoin adopters were against like ordinals overall. I'm assuming they're going to be against this as well. I think they already kind of have been, because it's kind of that a lot of them feel like Bitcoin should be kind of just focused on being a store of value. I don't know. Have you heard?
I mean,
or
this is
I
going to
guess
be
have you heard?
surprising, but
Do
there's a
you
lot
care?
on the internet. There's a lot of opinions I've come to find out. Like it's like they're everywhere. And
Sure.
I don't like. I could see an argument of like, hey, this is my Bitcoin. They're precious to me. Don't graffiti on everything, because like that I was at first when I saw ordinals, I was like, you're basically like writing on every dollar, right? Like the people that draw on dollars,
Yeah.
and I'm like, that's. I guess it's cool, but I didn't see why it was technically better than the Ethereum ones, other than being completely on chain. And I do think that there is some merit
Yeah.
there. But then once we got to it, it's like it's not just images, it's whatever. Like, and this could go further, where you could have 1,000 satoshis with pieces of like an independent movie that now you build some kind of playlist thing that pulls those and loads them like they're a torrent file, right? Like where you're pulling all the little satoshis and stitching them together real time. And now it's a file, like it's a movie. It's a way that we've got a movie on there forever. I think all these things are going to start to happen, and
it's like you read the books like 1984 where it's like burn all the books. It's like, well, if it's on chain and it's there forever, then anybody in the future could just reference that book and read it, and I think that's cool too.
I don't think it hurts
Yeah,
anything.
That's a great
I don't
point,
think it
man. Like
devalues
storing,
like the whole store value argument. I don't think it devalues the store value, because it can also do other things. It can be both, I think, and I don't think one harms the other, unless you're looking at like, hey, now suddenly more people are using Bitcoin, and the fee, like the transaction stuff is becoming an issue. But if you want your thing to be a store of value, I think people should want to use it. And so this is giving, it's that double-edged. You can't be like, no, this is my money, I'm going to hoard it, and I'm never going to. But now the fees are high. So
I've seen the joke of like you want like mass adoption, you want people to use your chain, but like when people like start using it, you like freak out because like, oh gosh, so many people are using it, the fees are up.
But
it's kind of
the early days of like the phones, even, right? Like that we went from like normal phones to like party lines to like all these party lines I've heard of. I'm not trying to date myself with all that, but like it's the early stuff, right? And I think that we're so used to instant gratification and things happening like just like it should just happen. It should just be like magic and all, because we see like smartphones and all these things that make it so easy, but it's a ton of work to get there. And so we're in the decentralized ton of work. We're not a big corporation that has funds to like pay people 24/7 to work on these things. So it's a grassroots thing, and you're starting to see businesses see where they can support like self-sustain and build things. So we're just getting started as far as this is a very interesting kind of thing. I'm not saying like my idea is super interesting. I'm saying like ordinals in general are super interesting, and I hope that someone takes this concept and takes it even further, because it's only going to benefit everybody. Sorry for cutting you off.
Yeah, it's interesting, and like you said, the fee thing, that could be, I don't know, people that like Lightning, maybe it gives them a actual reason to use Lightning at some point. Like that Lightning network has been a thing for years, and it just hasn't really taken off like it people thought it would. But maybe that gives them more reason to be like, hey, we're still here and building. So maybe we could see some other use cases on Bitcoin and other developers, kind of rise up, if you will, and have a little bit more, room to grow and things like that. So that could be another interesting topic there. For those of you guys that don't know what Lightning is, it's just like a underneath Bitcoin layer type of scenario where you're just sending Bitcoin back and forth, and then eventually it'll finalize on the Bitcoin like top layer, essentially. It's kind of like a layer 2 in a sense.
Well, in my case, you're just sending Bitcoin, not back and forth, but just back, because the last time I used Lightning, I sent Kyle some Bitcoin and I never saw that Bitcoin again.
Well, it has there's like the settlement layers are different than the normal Bitcoin that you send back and forth. The Lightning is kind of like digital IOUs. It's similar to like layer 2.
No, I'm just saying, last time I sent you Bitcoin over Lightning, I never saw that again.
Oh yeah, it was like $2. I think
it doesn't matter how much it was. It just if you send Kyle back Bitcoin, don't expect to see it again.
It's not a FUD bitch.
Yeah, I don't. Well, yeah, go ahead,
no, I was gonna say like Lightning. I think there's a learning curve, and that's gotten way easier. Like I've seen a ton of like the graphical interfaces back in the day. It was like, wait, what? Okay, I'm just gonna put like to what you're describing. Like I'm gonna put this Bitcoin in a hole, and oh, no magic happened. So I guess I lost the lottery. It doesn't actually work that way. And so if you're interested, I think people should look into it. But yeah, I think that
super easy to run a node too, like a little Raspberry Pi.
There's tons of. So again, I think this is like to what we said earlier about like this feels like going back when you've seen like Ethereum, like smart contracts and NFTs were there, like all the action was kind of happening on Ethereum, and then coming over to Bitcoin, and you're like, wait, what? This seems archaic. I have to run a terminal like application on my machine to do this. This doesn't feel safe. I feel like I'm going to screw up. But in a way, that was like early days Ethereum was similar, right? So like I think just now we're seeing this swing back, and I think the magic's when the two go work together. You can create unstoppable websites, but unstoppable businesses, and it's just going to get really interesting, I think. And then especially when it's not just this is like one smart contract to just basically feed like the database of how your website would work. It's a very low example, but I think it's still very powerful. But it's going to get really crazy when it's like this DApp and this DApp all converge on this one Satoshi, or it's one Satoshi that's running like a directory of other apps, and like it's going to get wild, I think, very quickly.
Yeah, I want to highlight too what Kyle said earlier. Like I've heard this before, I just forgot about it, but like the like historical value of being able to put things on Satoshis, I feel like is underrated. You know, like because like history has had a habit of burning books or deleting elements of history or muting voices that would have made history. So to have that permanence to it of people being able to document what they're going through or what they're seeing or their experience or whatever it is on ordinals, like that's significant. That's I feel like we've never had something equal to that before, because pretty much anything, either you weren't able to have your voice heard, or if you were, it could easily be destroyed on however you recorded it, or I don't know. So I'm interested to see how it unfolds, because obviously, like, bad actors are going to do bad things, and I hate that. And I do think I've heard from people much smarter than me that there are ways working with the miners and like AI filtration, like to have these like agreed upon crimes against humanity to be censored in the best way possible. So in my mind, I don't know how correct this is like if that's the case, then it's pretty much going to try to do the same job that the internet tried to do, which is like technically that stuff is still there, but like everyone tries to do their best to like not have it there, you know, like people still do awful things over the internet, and we try our best to filter it, but it still does exist. So I don't think like this newfound like decentralization aspect is going to be, and correct, I mean, give me your opinion on this. Like, I don't feel like it's going to be that much dramatically different, because that those awful crimes against humanity are still available on the internet. It's like we're trying constantly to filter them, but it's like they always pop up. You know, you can't just like stop a organization or whatever that's lives across like multiple, like, you know, it's not all in one spot. I don't know. What's your opinion on that? Because I mean, and that's, it feels uncomfortable to talk about, but like I want to talk about it because like that is something like that. Like, I mean, like I do care about morality and ethics, and stuff like that. So like it's something that is important.
I think it's going to come down to like discoverability, right? Like somebody like there's a million people in a room talking all at once. Like somebody said something like shitty, it still happens, but like there's so much noise. How many people are going to pay attention? I could see directory, like this is going to sound weird, but like this is like a dark web, right? It's, you have to know that full Satoshi or that full ordinal address to be able to view the thing. And so I think you'll start to see directories come up with like, here's the email, here's like a text editor that you can use for free that's decentralized. All of these things are going to start to crop up, and like a directory that's for the common good will hoist those things up to where they get more use and they get one over. You could see that somebody do something shitty and then have a directory of that. That might exist, but if you can just like not showcase that and elevate that, it's going to exist, but they're not going to see it, right? Like I think that's, unless you go looking for that kind of thing, like that's the hope. It would be like, yes.
Which I guess, would it be fair to say that like that's almost the same way it is right now?
I think the difference is
I would. So I got a couple arguments. Yeah, so I got a couple of arguments against that though, because like with Web 2, you still could have a bad actor, like, you know, go off and hire people to take your website down, DDoS you, to hack you, to do all these things with web, with what we're talking about. It's much more harder to do that. Like, you can't just, let's go 51% attack Bitcoin and try to, like, do all these things. It becomes much more difficult. And you're already seeing that in the blockchain space. People are already using Filecoin, for example, to document this stuff. They're actually already documenting war crimes. So they're using the, IPFS system to store some of these images and what's going on in the wider world already. And it is decentralized, and there might be some, like, you could still kind of maybe look into how you could attack that, but it's still much more safer than just storing it on, like, just some random server, that could be blown up.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to, is the in the Web 2 arena, if someone posts something crappy, there's a legal system that can subpoena servers and whatnot, and like, it's cat and mouse at that point in a way. Whereas this, like, there's no one to go, like, let me talk to Bitcoin's manager. Like, there's no one to talk to, right? So, like, in that sense, that's where it comes into, like, unstoppable. And I think it will be used for bad, unfortunately. Like, some people will use this for bad, but I hope that more people use it for good. And the things that are bad just kind of are a dark little pocket that, it's going to be there. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't like open up all the light options that people are going to use this for, to run a website that's sharing a passion for somebody's stuff, that somebody might bully it and DDoS it, or whatever the case may be, or starting a business, or starting a social network, or all kinds of things that could be good. Social network may be gray, but I mean, like, a positive, so, like, whatever. Anyway, but just, I think this could be used.
I mean, yeah, that's crazy to think about too. Like, there could be an entire social media within a Satoshi.
Yeah, TikTok, they want to ban it. Maybe it moves to this Satoshi. It's an ordinal now. Have fun, government. So yeah, I don't know. I think that this very much like AI is not something that's just you can put back in the box. I think people are going to keep tinkering and keep exploring, and the use cases that make sense and have value will rise. You're going to see a lot of people that, small story, like, I was younger, and it was like New Year's Eve, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is an opportunity. We can be the first people to do everything. We're the first kids to jump on a trampoline. We're the first ones to drink a whole gallon of milk. That didn't go well. But, like, all these, we're the first. And so I think right now there's going to be a lot of noise of, like, I'm the first to do this in an oral. I'm the first to do that. Like, cool, good job. But there are always going to be then the ones that separate from that, of, like, it's not about the first. It's this is the first step to getting to something really cool. And so, like, there's going to be a lot of value that comes. There's also going to be a lot of, like, I'm the first person to post a picture of this, or I'm the first person to do, like, so there's going to be this kind of divide, and we need the first kind of, like, being loud to bring attention to it, to pull more people in. But it's the first things of value that I would pay attention to.
Yeah, like,
that's good. It's like, Amazon wasn't the first website, but they bring a lot of value now to at least, society, in terms of delivering packages very quickly and solving some logistic problems. So, yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Ordinals did that. Like, the first, like, 10,000 Ordinals, like 99% of them were trash. Like, they were awful. Like, it was literally just like people inscribing already pre-made collections, or they were inscribing like random numbers or random whatever. But the narrative behind, like, oh, well, this is the first 10,000 inscriptions, gave it value. I don't have the floor price pulled up right now, but I mean, it's already, like, somewhat, like, the floor price is somewhat valuable compared to the inscription fees. I've never been sold on that narrative, even though the people tend to sell that narrative, because ENSs did the same thing. Like, ENS numbers, like, if you had, like, 111.eth or whatever, well, it didn't have to be a special number. It could be like 248 .eth. That was valuable. So, like, if you had a 3-digit number ENS, like, that was worth like a couple ETH at one point, and then it was 4-digit ENS, and then it was 5-digit ENS. These numbers.
I know that ideology from somewhere, some kind of app.
Yeah, I mean,
I see that play out on an app that I know.
What is it?
It's Vivi.
I know, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, with the Vivi, like, I get it a little bit. Okay, first off, I've always been clear about it. Like, I've even on Vivi never been big on, like, the first appearance on the blockchain as much, but I do get. I would understand the narrative a little bit more, because it's more from, like, collecting. So I get it, because coming from that, like, collector's experience, like, the first appearances do matter from a collecting standpoint. So if it's going to be a collector's app and, like, you're viewing it from collecting, like, I do see I understand the narrative. Going back to what I just said about everything else, it's still not really my narrative personally, just because like it's just not. I don't know. It doesn't like make sense in my. It makes sense, but it's just not
Yeah.
me. Like I go for like you said, like Amazon's like experience or whatever. Like I don't even know who the first what Amazon was like, and that's not something I care about. But I guess in like collecting, like if you have this is like I guess like a first gen Pudgy Penguin collector's item. But so like I guess like 10 years from now, if we're on like Gen 10 of this, then I could see how it'd be cool. Like, man, I kind of want that Gen 1, and then this is the Gen 1,
But you opened it.
I see how that is valuable.
But you opened
What?
it, so it's
Yeah, you
it's
opened
worth
it. You
nothing
can get it
now.
graded now, bro.
Well, that's the thing. Like
It's
that's
like
the
a
thing. I'm
6.0
not
grade.
like going against the narrative. I'm just like I play with my stuff. Like I don't know. Like I've always been one to
That's
open
why the
box.
Gen 1s
I've been one to open
you know,
boxes
gain in
and
value.
play with cards. Like I actually played Pokemon cards. I didn't just collect them. So like I'm just
Yeah.
built
I'm
different
in
that
the same
area.
camp as you. I think I'm a weird collector, and I don't speak for everybody. Like all my arts, I have a whole shelf over here of like just art figures and stuff like that from friends and people that I've kind of just gotten to know along this journey. And I open all of them because I want to display them. I want to interact with them. And I think that's one thing that the VV stuff does have. It's like it can stay mint and you can play with it, right? And I think that's even
Yeah, that's true.
other like competitor, like other companies are doing similar, where you can either open them or not open them, but like there's still like the fun if you open it and it's still mint. Like I can sell that and no one's getting
Mhm.
damaged goods or like a scuffed shoe or whatever. But back to like the short like number dot etf, like those DNS or ENS names. I think those short things are similar to short websites, right? Like a 2-digit website or a 2-character or 3-character website. Like I think that's where the value comes from. I think it's less about the number itself,
Yeah.
but you could actually take a short number and make that a persona, right? I can be like I'm 180.eth. Like that's my like those are things that where I think the value comes from. But much like first FA house, right? Like there's a chance that those houses are not standing anymore or not as good. Like sure, some of them are historical things that have been restored and kept good and all that, but a lot of them are rubble, right? Because they just didn't stand up. So like it's an interesting thing sometimes of like the first verse, like I don't know, even like a FA like Hulk, right? And I'm not super into Marvel, so I'm just using this as an example, not shitting on anyone's collection. But like if the FA Hulk is cool and everyone loves it, then that's what it is. But if me as a again a weird collector, if there's a Hulk that's coming out where he's like punching through a tank and it's just badass looking, like guess which one I'm probably gonna buy. Like I want the cool over the FA, but I also understand, like you were saying, like I understand the FA and I understand the significance. And there's a lot of FAs that I do want, because I do think like it's the story behind it, it's this, it's that. But at the same time, like if there's like 4 of the thing, I'm going to pick the coolest one, and then maybe as a secondary, maybe the FA. Right. So I think there's value, but I just think it depends on the person. I don't know how we got into it. Like
That's what I meant, by the way, by what I was saying earlier. I probably just didn't say it in a great way, and I will probably get canceled for what I'm about to say
Straight to jail. Straight to jail.
by the VV community
Inscribe yourself on
if they
Ordinals.
made it to this 52-minute mark and past everything else. But like that's why originally, like even with like the golden moments, in my head it's always like that Iron Man gold moment is cool, but I would much rather like an Iron Man that like looked like Iron Man and like maybe could
or
like
like it
fly
slowly hovers in
around or
place
like
or something like that. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
yeah, hovers or like it's chest glow. Like personally, as like the collector I am, I would if they're side by side in the same price, I would buy that one, and I don't care which one was first. But again, I understand the narrative of like, okay, well, this one was the first, so that's why I'm applying value to that one. But that's what I meant earlier. Like to me, it's just like what I like more is probably what I'd be more likely to buy. But all that being said, like going back to the little penguin analogy, I do think if I really loved an IP and like I was like buying like the other generations of that IP, I am the type of person that would want to maybe complete the set and get that first gen as well. So I totally see why maybe it's like, well, dang, like I do have to pay a premium for that Gen 1 because there's just less people willing to sell it now or whatever. Like I could definitely
I
see
just think there's
that.
the thing that I've gotten, because I wouldn't have called myself a collector like 4 years ago, right? Like I always had like collections of toys and all that stuff, but like it was more for like these are toys and I like to have fun. I want to have all the characters because I want to have huge battles or whatever the case may be. But I've gotten to know that there's like a collector does not take one form, right? Like everyone comes in and has a different approach. Some people would run right to the FAs because they care about the historical significance and it's limited, and they're the only, like you were saying, like you might have to pay a premium later if you change your mind that you're not going out. So I could see the justification for the FAs. I could also see the people saying like, that's out of my price range of what I feel its value is worth. Over here, I can get this cool thing for half the price, or whatever the case be. And I think it's the blend of all of it, being able to thrive and have something for everyone that draws me to things like VB. But yeah,
This was all sponsored by VB.
no, I mean, I have no
full circle to VB.
You guys, hey, you didn't say it. I came here for ordinal website, like unstoppable websites. So
do you, so before we close out, because I think Chris is like about to like cancel us
he's
in
trying to get
about
us
a
to
minute.
say that something's alive or dead, and I'm not going to play that game.
What?
do we or Brock, what do you have a specific like ordinal collection you like, or are you just kind of just in the mode of really not so much, just innovation?
Yeah,
type,
I think
type
like
thing?
if I'm being honest, like at first I was like, like I had some art friends reach out to me and they're like, "Is this cool? Like, what do you think of this?" And I'm like, "I'm not. It does nothing for me to just, if it's just digital artifacts and it's just a reframing of NFTs. I get it, but I'm not excited by it." And then seeing this thing, I'm like, "Oh, it's this." And I had a conversation with a buddy of mine, Brian Morris, who's an artist. He's like, this. He wanted me to explain this to him because he's like, I want to make like his whole thing. And sorry, Brian. He wants to make like art that's like closer and closer to being alive, where when you look at it, it grows and it changes and it's self-sustained on like. And this is an idea that he had like 2 years ago when we were talking, and this now is like very, very close to what he had envisioned, where it's the self-contained living organism of art. And I think that this gets almost there, and so I think it's very exciting for that realm of the art and this. And so like, as much as like I love this industry of like but it's the just JPEGs. Sometimes a pixelated cat doesn't do as much for me as, and I'm not even saying like it needs like Unreal Vision 5 graphics. Like it's not a graphical thing, but it's like a flat this thing, or it's this living creature over here that does something. And I think that's what I did with Fish is like they look silly purposely, but they move around and then they can, and soon enough they'll be able to be customizable with hats and all these other things. Like that to me is cool and exciting and fun. And again, not trying to poo-poo anybody's collection, but I think it's very, very early, and I think there'll be some things that are flat images that have huge significance because the art is just breathtaking or whatever. But I also think there's going to be some things where it's that marriage of creativity and technology together to create this thing that just has never existed before. That's what excites me.
Yeah.
Are you gonna be mad if I'm the first to teleburn a Fish to an ordinal?
Go for it.
You gotta,
yeah, teleburning is a whole different like burning Ethereum NFTs and inscribing Bitcoin ordinal.
Somebody did it with an ape, like way before it was like acceptable. Like when I say acceptable, like basically a majority of the people like didn't care about ordinals, and like it was still really early. And somebody teleburned an ape, like a very expensive ape, and it was crazy. But they were like super rich, like they didn't care at all. I think he literally
you guys told him no, that was not an official. It's no longer an official Yuga Labs NFT.
He basically said he said it felt like putting a Lamborghini in a that thing that like smashes cars.
Trash compactor.
Yeah, an impactor.
But I mean, like, that's right. It got him a lot of eyes, especially if he doesn't care about like the ape as much. So I could see, but some people, there's always going to be somebody that does something like wacky that doesn't maybe make sense to everybody. But also like there's a chance that like that actually ends up playing off of like now that's a moment in crypto history and all kinds of other things.
Yeah. I mean, totally. Dude,
I think the idea of teleburn too was to encourage Ethereum NFT or developers to kind of look at Bitcoin as an option just to do things over there too. So I think they kind of accomplished that a little bit. You know, maybe it didn't get as in the wider ecosystem, but I think it did turn some heads there. Chris, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I mean, like it's already like in his favor. I feel like now that like ordinals are a lot wider accepted, like at least in their little bubble, much less like if this were to get even like a bigger scale, because like he went on a limb and did that. And on top of that, like let's say like in the future, like ordinals and everything we're talking about is still very relevant. I feel like that story is always going to be permanent. Like somebody might even inscribe that story of like remember that guy who like burned a Bored Ape? Or let's like ignore the fact that it was a Bored Ape. Remember that guy that burned like over a 6-figure asset, like right when Ordinals became a thing? Like, I mean, that's like a funny story, or that like to like the average person that like could be like more permanent than money. Like, like I don't know. It's just he just basically engraved his name on history by doing that, or like could have potentially done that.
The flip side that I think is like a founder of a project, like if you did like teleburn, whether it's a fiche or anything else, like me as the runner of a project, like I can no longer use the mechanisms that I've built out to continue to airdrop you things or to do so. Like there's you're almost kind of like taking something that has a lot of utility if it does, and going, hey, cool, like snapping a skateboard in half. Like I can't give you the rest of the stuff that I hope to give everybody that holds something, because you're on this different network that I'm not set up to support. And so it's pretty early. Eventually, though, there might be where it's like, it doesn't matter. Like even with me, like it doesn't matter if you're on Polygon or Ethereum or IMX or any of these other things, because I've built those rails to handle that. And eventually, I might do something with Ordinals, with Fiche or something else. Maybe that now those greater ecosystems can combine, and now you're good. But you're doing it early, so like just know that you like the risk. And I think with the ape, it's a little bit different. But if Yugo drops another bunch of stuff, like they're not going to see that ape as part of the collection anymore, and so they're going to miss out, kind of thing. So be careful before you light your stuff on fire, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, be careful before you burn your stuff. That's not recommended. But yeah, we're up on the hour mark. Brock, thank you so much, man. This has been a great conversation. We're going to have to do it again on the Degen Dads podcast. If you guys are watching, be sure to be subscribed to both Kyle and I for the Degen Dads podcast. We switch channels every week. Next week it's going to be on Kyle's. We do have a Twitter as well, and sometimes we broadcast this to Twitter Spaces, but I wanted to play it safe today with Brock and with this really intense conversation that, I mean, could be a lot more relevant. I feel like a lot of people are going to be watching it right now, just kind of like, yeah, that's cool. But if everything plays out, like, this is going to be very relevant.
Remember what happened when we covered Ordinals early on? And
yeah.
Nobody said anything, and a couple weeks, months went by, and then it blew up.
Yeah, and this could be that, and this isn't really like some of the things that we talk about, like, sure, could have like some type of like underlying like financial opportunities, if you want to say, or whatever, like for being early. This is more just like a very revolutionary thought of like what could happen with this and how it could change the world, honestly. So at the very beginning of this introduction, like I kind of said that even like on a more dialed down scale, but like I really meant it. Like this is pretty revolutionary, and like I stick with that. So thanks, Brock, for sharing with us today, coming up with the idea, and Kyle thank you for existing, bro, and being able.
I'm gonna inscribe. I'm gonna create a file, an AI file of myself. I'm gonna clone my AI self and then inscribe that to a Satoshi, so it'll always exist.